Okay, here we have an unpopulated PCB, and here is a populated PCB. The reason I'm calling the clock a moddable clock is because I've broken out at the bottom of the board a whole bunch of I/O. So you've got SPI and I2C. You've also got 5 volts, 3.3 volts broken out, and 2 grounds. So you can connect other sensors or other hardware to the clock if you want to. If you wanted to add your own battery-backed RTC, if you wanted to take the actual clock off Wi-Fi control, if you wanted to add any sensors like a temp sensor or some other things, you can connect them there, and then you can use the display, reflash the ESP8266 to make it display whatever you want to. It's using a CP2104 USB serial chip with USB, so not only does the USB power the clock, but you can actually use either the Arduino IDE or MicroPython if you like, and you can actually flash and recode the ESP8266. All of the code that comes with the clock is open source. It's all available on my GitHub repository, so feel free to fork it and change it. You can make the clock do anything you want to. The other thing I've got on the clock is the ability to either control the screen from an external input, and there's also data out as well, so you can add more digits to the clock if you want to. And you also have the ability through some jumpers that are on the back, just here, to decide whether you want to bypass the colon and whether you want to actually have data go out or not. So there it is. That is the PCB fully assembled. Let's have a look at the clock. Okay, this is the assembled clock. As you can see, the digits on the front. We have USB and a button on the side. The back itself has just some air vents. There's 2 screw connectors that you can mount the clock on the wall, and just over here there is an LDR facing this way for ambient light sensing. Okay, let's plug it in. Uses a micro B USB connector. When you plug it in, it goes through a boot cycle, tries to connect to the Wi-Fi using the previous credentials. So it's currently 16 minutes past 10 in Melbourne, Australia. The colours you're seeing right now are just colours that I chose from the web interface. So the default display, you can choose a colour for the digits and a colour for the colon. The button on the side, if you push it once, it'll cycle through the different colour modes. As you can see, this is an animating colour mode where it just animates digits. This one is using a rainbow pattern going sideways. This one is using a vertical animation. And this one is just using different random colours. There's quite a few in there. I'll just leave it on there for now. That's for single press on the button. A double press on the button will show you the IP address. So 192.168.1.88. So at any time you can find out what the IP address is, and then you can go to the web interface to play with all the different settings. Let's have a look at the web interface now. Okay, here I'm showing the clock next to the Wi-Fi settings. As you can see, 192.168.1.88, and it's a web interface. Gives you some status information about the clock, what SSID you're connected to, what the strength is, how long the clock has been up for, how many updates it's done. You can set whichever NTP time server you want. In this case I'm just using time.nist.gov, but you can set it to be part of the pool. You can adjust how often you want it to update. So for instance, right now every hour it'll go to the internet and it'll resync the clock. You can change that all the way up to every 12 hours if you want to. Let's put it back to 1. Right now it's using the LDR. I can tell it to not use the LDR. So right now it won't detect any ambient light changes. That's useful if you want to hang it on the wall, because the LDR won't work anymore. You can adjust what the maximum brightness is going to be. I'll just put the LDR back on again. So right now the maximum brightness is going to get to is 33%, and that's what it's going to range between. But you can actually make it brighter. If I take it all the way up to 100%, you saw how bright it got. And now with the LDR on, if I stick my finger behind the LDR here, you can see it gets brighter and darker based on how much ambient light there is. You can adjust the default digits. So if I put the clock back into just the default mode, I can now, as you see there's purple and yellow, I can make might just make it blue. You see, It's real-time updates, and blue and green for the colon. There we go. So they'll be saved now. They're the default settings for the first visual mode. You can adjust between 24 hour and 12 hour. Obviously, it's the morning still, so you won't see that change. And you can set what your GMT time zone is. Now with daylight savings, it's a bit of a tricky one. I've yet to find a reliable online API that gives me accurate daylight saving information. So I just opted for the ability to set the start and the end day and date and hour. So in my case, it's 7th of the 10th at 2 o'clock in the morning is when it turns on. 7th of the 4th at 2 o'clock in the morning is when it finishes. And that's pretty much it. All of this again, all the code for the settings and for the firmware for the clock is all open source. So you'll be able to change this to your heart's content.